What's going on, everybody, and welcome in to your B-Shape Daily live stream. Tonight, talking some Cardinal baseball. How's it going, folks? The Cardinals doing a lot better than the last time we convened, so hopefully everybody's in a good mood tonight. Get those comments in, and we will make sure that everything sounds good, looks good, the technology is cooperating, and then we'll get going right away. Since we are already after the 11 p.m. hour in the Central Time Zone. I wonder what that makes it in the London time zone. Let's Google that. What time is it in London? Because that will be relevant to the Cardinals' interests very soon. 5:14 a.m. in London, for those who are wondering. So I don't know if they're watching us yet in the UK, or if they're still they're sleeping in a little bit beyond 5 a.m. I sure would like to be tomorrow morning. Hello to Ryan. Hello to Tommy, Kevin, Hero314. Jack is here. Jack says nothing better than a few drinks after getting off work and talking Cardinal baseball. Well, hey, I'm happy to be able to help you out with that. My drink of choice for the stream will be water, but who's to say that that can't change in the future, right? But for today, for a Tuesday night, I'll go with water. But we'll be getting things going here pretty quick. Like the stream if you guys would be so kind. If you're just joining, welcome in. Looks like so far so good on the stream connection. Give us a like. Give us a subscription if you have not subbed before to the YouTube channel. Welcome in. A lot of Cardinals talk coming to this channel the rest of the season. A lot of it that we've had so far already. But excited to offer a little bit more for those who are wondering, where have you been? Well, last couple of days we've just been doing the regular B-Shape Daily with no live version of it. And before that, I think I missed 3 days in a row. My Nana, my mom's mom, my grandma passed away on Friday. And so we've been dealing with a lot of things pertaining to that. And so it's meant a little bit hands off in terms of Cardinals content. But we're back here tonight with a live stream. Hope you guys are ready to rock and roll talking some Cardinals tonight. Let's get your comments in. Topics of conversation tonight. We'll talk Jordan Montgomery, the nice outing that he had. Dylan Carlson, yeah, I think his name is going to come up. If you listened to B-Shape Daily last night, talked about how I was a little concerned. Yeah, he might end up being the guy to get squeezed out of the lineup with Lars Nootbaar back. And it did happen in the first game of Nootbaar's return on Monday. But then Dylan was back in the lineup on Tuesday, and boy, howdy was he. Looking really good with a couple of home runs. So what can we expect maybe moving forward for his opportunity? And everybody knows the hashtag here, so feel free to put that into. I see Ryan has already done so. Jack talking about Dylan Dingers. So a lot of fun with Dylan Carlson and his performance tonight for the Cardinals in a 9-3 win. Looks like we've got everything going with the connection, and so I'm going to assume it is now safe to tweet out the link. And once I do that, we'll be underway. So get the comments in. Any questions that you guys have to get the ball rolling? I'm going to try not to drone on too much because, again, we've had B-Shape Daily podcasts the last 2 days. If you have been following along on YouTube or Spotify, Apple Podcasts, where B-Shape Daily can be found, we've been doing the show. It's just not always live, but tonight it will be. So make sure you're following along on Spotify if you want to help me out in that way. It's free, but it helps me to be having you guys follow everywhere that podcasts are heard. So let me tweet this out. Let's see how I want to phrase this. Are the Cardinals back? Can the season be salvaged? And we'll tackle those questions tonight. What do you guys think? Where are you at after 4 straight wins? Obviously, they're still in last place, but I'm curious kind of what the temperature is of Cardinals fans a little bit, because certainly they've made a run now, and they're starting a run anyway, and I think it's one they're going to have to continue for a while. But how far do they have to go before you buy back in? Because I know a lot of people weren't exactly bought in with what we've been seeing, which is not necessarily your fault, because they weren't giving you much to be excited about. But now, starting to put it together against the Nationals, did it over the weekend against the Mets. Can they keep it going tomorrow? I think it's important as they look for some momentum going into London. But let me type up this YouTube tweet, and then we'll be off and running. Just a moment, guys. It's a talent I have still not mastered, is typing and talking at the same time. You'd think I'd be better at it, but I'm not. And there we go. We had Dylan Carlson as our picture. I took this photo of him back at winter warm-up. I felt like that was appropriate tonight after the game that he had. And this is a hashtag Everyday Dylan podcast, so I thought it was fitting. All right. You can retweet that on Twitter if you would like to do so. I can pull that down, put this back up. Looks like we've got plenty of comments. Rob is in the house. That's good to see. Rob, not necessarily too confident, but that's okay. Look, I see the standings, and you can too tonight as well, as I'll put those up on the screen for a little bit. Okay, 9 likes on the stream. Let's get it rolling. Get those likes up, 15 or 20. Love to see that happen. And, yeah, that's about all I got in terms of a preamble. Let's make sure we're good to go on the recording on Audacity. We are. And so one sip of water, and we will be underway. All right. Get those questions and comments in. If you're finding yourself unable to comment, subscribe to the channel, and it takes about 60 seconds, and they'll clear you to be able to join the live chat. I want to get this microphone up a little higher so I don't have to bend down. Back problems are no joke. Okay. In 3, 2, 1. What's going on, everybody, and welcome in to this edition of B Schaeffer Daily Live. As tonight we're talking a Cardinals win, and those have been a little more familiar recently, haven't they, Cardinals fans? 4 wins in a row for the Cardinals as they've won the first 2 games of this series against the Nationals in Washington, D.C., that coming on the heels of a couple of wins to cap off the series in New York. 4 games in a row the Cardinals have won. I've got it showing on the screen right now, and though I don't, man, I'm dumb. Should be showing now on the screen the standings in the NL Central, which still have the Cardinals, with a bit of a road to hoe, as they say. Cardinals still in last place, but they're 12 games below 500. That's better than it had been. The Cincinnati Reds, you might notice their column, 10-0 in their last 10. That's going to be a problem. I've been on that train for a little while now, talking about the Reds as a dangerous threat. Milwaukee came back to win tonight against, who were they playing? I think the Diamondbacks. That would have been a nice one for the Cardinals to get because you got to pass all these teams eventually. But for right now, I think it's more than anything else about the Cardinals just taking care of the business that they can handle, and they're doing that right now. You can only play who you're scheduled to play, and you can only beat who you're scheduled to face. And the Cardinals have been able to do that 4 days in a row. What's everybody feeling tonight about the St. Louis Cardinals? Get those comments in on this live chat. Subscribe to the B Schaeffer Daily channel. It's really just the Brenden Schaeffer YouTube channel. That's my channel. Been talking a lot of Cardinals baseball here all season long. We are developing a nice little community, which has been a lot of fun. If you'd like to be a part of that, I'd love to have you. And so all you got to do is subscribe to the channel here, like this stream. You don't technically have to do that part, but it's nice to do it. We count the likes as we go along on this show. And then join in the live chat. Let me know that you're here and that you're new. If this is your first time joining in, I'd love to know that and get you in and get you welcome. So thank you guys for being here. I'm really just going to give a quick little recap of this game, basically just talking Dylan Carlson because he hits 2 home runs tonight, coming on the heels of a period where we kind of wondered how much playing time Dylan Carlson's actually going to see moving forward with Lars Nootbaar back off the injured list. We've talked about it on B Schaeffer Daily the last couple of days, how Dylan could get squeezed out if they continue to play Tommy Edman in center, if they continue to play Paul DeJong at shortstop. Dylan Carlson could be the guy that gets squeezed a little bit. But with a lefty on the mound tonight against the Cardinals and Mackenzie Gore, thought maybe we'd see Dylan back in there. We talked about that possibility last night. Sure enough, it happened, and sure enough, he showed out with a couple of home runs, really pacing the Cardinals in this 9-3 win. Wasn't just him that had good offensive days for St. Louis. Of course, Paul DeJong with the garbage time home run makes it a little more difficult to sort of talk against him, that maybe he should give some of that playing time to Carlson. But with both those guys going well, that's something the Cardinals can appreciate and would certainly hope can continue as the season goes along. But Goldschmidt had a nice day. Really important to see Wilson Contreras with a 3-hit day. That's, that veteran in the middle of the lineup. And obviously it seems the way Ollie Marmol has done things, he's going to stay in the middle of the lineup. It's absolutely critical to get him going and get that consistently. As we've seen maybe Arenado tail off a little bit. We know that Nolan Gorman has tailed off a little bit recently, kind of a lot of it. If you take a look at his numbers as we did last night on the show, you're going to have some consistency from some of the guys. And it'd be nice if Contreras could be one of those. They certainly paid him to be. When they gave him $87.5 million, it wasn't just to be the team's catcher. It was to be a force in the middle of the lineup and generally in that 5 spot. Today in the 4 spot, moved him up, and he came through. So good to see. Can he continue it? Remains to be seen. but this was a good start, and really not even a start, a continuation, because Contreras has shown a little bit better offensively, even going back to the Mets series when he had a home run in that series. Brendan Donovan continues to take some of the best ABs on the team. I've been just tooting his horn the entire way, saying the OPS, all the numbers that had been down for BFD, are going to be back. They're going to be there by the end of the year. He's up to a 757 OPS. Really good stuff. And it doesn't matter where you play him in the field, doesn't matter where you put him in the lineup. He's been able to contribute. So good to see from Brendan Donovan. And then, of course, the pitching tonight from Jordan Montgomery kind of feels like they needed it. After Jordan Hicks, the apparent closer of this team now, was ridden pretty hard the last 3 days. You needed a long outing from Montgomery, and honestly, you needed the kind of performance the offense gave so that it didn't matter who was pitching the 8th and 9th. Verhagen, Woodford, that's exactly how you would dial it up, and they both give up a run. It just doesn't matter because the offense came through. So that's the breakdown tonight, but let me know what you enjoyed about the game, what you've enjoyed about the last 4 games as the Cardinals have gone on this run, and what you think about this team moving forward and their prospects to try and climb out of the cellar and maybe make a run of things in the NL Central. Going to take a quick drink, and then we'll get right into your comments after my preamble's done. We're gonna dive right in tonight. Make sure you like the stream and subscribe, and we'll be back in a moment. All right, let's go ahead and dive into the comments because I know that I already see quite a few of them. I'll try to remember to change up the screen as we go along. I like to put the stats up, the box score, things of that nature. And for now, we'll show the offense on the screen a little bit because that is an important aspect of what the Cardinals were able to come up with tonight, really top to bottom. I want to make sure we get Donovan's name on there at the bottom because he was an important contributor. Didn't score any runs or drive any in, but just to continue seeing him take good ABs has been nice to see for sure. So what's going on, guys? Let's get into the comments here. Ryan says hello. Tommy talking about 4 in a row. Go Cardinals. Everything is right time. Right time's a nice way to put it. Kevin still has opinions about the team. Eventually, Kevin may share those opinions. You're welcome to do so, okay? Hiru314 says this will be the story of the MLB when we get back to 500. Talking about the Cardinals. Yeah, look, I mean, they've got 12 games to get back there. They're still 12 under. It's not going to happen overnight, but the fact that they're finally taking care of a portion of their schedule that, on paper at least, it looks a little softer. To be doing it on the road is nice. I want to look in their 31 and 43. I want to look at their home road splits. They got that on here. They do. They're getting closer to 500 as a road team. This is glaring, though. This 13 and 21 record at home has absolutely got to be absolved. They have to play better baseball at Busch Stadium. It seems like every time I go and cover a game, they lose, and that's basically been because they've lost most of their home games. I think the London series does count as a home game, but I'll try to remember as we go along to not count it because I want to know what they do at Busch Stadium the rest of the season. You've got, the B-Fib moniker is a little overplayed, but you've got a group of fans that does go out and support this team on a daily, on a nightly, on a weekly basis. And they haven't played well in front of you guys at home at Busch Stadium. So that's something that's got to be resolved at some point. But for right now, they're 12 games under. They're 8 games back of the Reds, who just refuse to lose. Yeah, that's the team I'd be looking at, folks. Milwaukee, I'm still not convinced they don't sell at the deadline. The Cubs, I think, could actually be intriguing as a buyer at the deadline if they can get to 500. As an 8-2 team. I flat out have told you for weeks I don't believe in the Pirates, and you see right there the reason. You see right there the reason. They're 1-9 in their last 10. They've lost 8 straight. That's about where the Pirates, they're going to probably win 70, 75 games. They could even flirt with upper 70s. I just don't think it's going to be anything beyond that. And at the end of the day, they probably run out of steam and end up really looking like a cellar dweller again. If I had to pick somebody to finish last in the division right now, I know that they're just as easily could climb back up into it, but I think Pittsburgh does end up being the worst team in this division, which I don't know if I always thought that this year, but the magic seems to have worn off from them. So, yes, back to 500 would be a heck of a story. It's not a guarantee to be enough, but the more games you can win right now, the better it's going to look later on. So, nice to see the Cardinals able to do what they can as of right now. Jack says nothing better than a few drinks after getting off work and talking Cardinal baseball. So let me know what you're drinking tonight. I'm just drinking water, but If you're drinking something else, I couldn't blame you for it, as you might be celebrating a Cardinal winner after 4 wins in a row. Ryan brings up the elephant in the room. It's the hashtag Everyday Dylan. Jack talking about Dylan dingers. Yep, that we are the hashtag Everyday Dylan podcast, and I get it. I get that his numbers this season overall have not been particularly glowing. As we kind of take a look here, see if we can't pull up Dylan Carlson's stats. He's up to a 246 average. The OPS sure took a leap tonight to 742, but I'm not blind to it. He was at around a 680 OPS prior to tonight. And if you look at his career stats, they just have not been overwhelmingly positive since that 780 OPS. We looked it up on one of the previous podcasts this week. Had a 780 OPS in the breakout year in 2021. Last year was 99 OPS plus, slightly below average contributor offensively per his position. And then this year you were seeing more of the same until a big 2-homer, 1-walk game tonight that Dylan had. I get it. I get that the numbers haven't been great. But you know what I still believe is the case? He's the best defensive center fielder this team has. And there's a lot of air being pumped into the metrics of Tommy Edman defensively in center. Like, I hear a lot of it from the analysts. I hear a lot of talk about it. And I'm not even saying any of it's false. I do. I think Tommy's doing an admirable job. I've used that term because I don't think it's easy what he's been able to accomplish for a guy that's not a center fielder by trade, but he's looking like one out there and is making a lot of these plays. Occasionally there are misplays that I think don't probably happen with Dylan out there. I do think Dylan probably has a stronger arm, but sometimes you can benefit more from Dylan's arm in right field. So I'm not going to, I'm not going to split hairs over that necessarily. I do think Tommy has done a plus job in center field. And congratulations to the Edmonds as well on the baby coming up in October. Very exciting news for them. I saw Tommy, or it may have been his wife that posted that on Instagram. I was seeing the screenshots float across Twitter today, so that's really cool news. Edmonds been playing great baseball, offensively, defensively. He was in the leadoff spot tonight, had another base knock, had another walk, scored a run, had a stolen base. He's doing a little bit of everything. The double steal that he and Edmund, that Edman and Goldschmidt were able to execute that led to a little bit of small ball there in the, I don't know if that was the 5th inning or when that was for the Cardinals, but that was a key spot just as they continue to tack on. I mean, you look at this box score, 2 in the 2nd, 2 in the 5th. You score in the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th off the sheet for a 9-run game. That's runs in 6 out of the 9 innings that they played. That is exactly what Cardinals fans, I think, have been waiting to see from this team. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the talk about, they can't score without a homer, and I realize some of the runs tonight did come via the home run. DeYoung does it with his home run. Dylan had 2, but a little bit of small ball as well mixed in there, which I think Dylan's second homer may have been in the 5th. How many RBIs did he have? Carlson? No, just 3. So maybe it was here that he had the second home run. I'm getting it conflated at this point. Doesn't matter. To score in 6 different innings is exactly where I think the Cardinals rarely found themselves previously in this season. They didn't have that kind of consistency at the plate. They might score 5 or 6 runs, but they might come in 1 or 2 different innings. And you were often left wanting for more based on the way the starting rotation or the bullpen might perform on those given nights. So to be able to have a very complete showing once again offensively against a pitcher that, like Mackenzie Gore, young pitcher, sure, but had good numbers coming in. Another example of the Cardinals beating up on a lefty, I think, is so important because when you look throughout this lineup, you've got guys like Goldie. You've got Arenado, who did not have a great game, obviously, but typically can really do damage against lefties. Contreras certainly can do so. Walker can do so. Newbar wasn't in the lineup, but he comes in late for Walker. What'd you think of that, by the way? The defensive replacement. I can get into it a little bit more if people want my opinion on it, but I didn't necessarily mind it. I think it's a sign of the times that the Cardinals and Ollie Marmol, they have to do everything that they can to win every game. There is urgency after each game, more so than it'd be nice to get Jordan Walker some development and more innings in the outfield. This roster, this team, and their place in the standings cannot afford it in 2023. They had to go for the gusto, and rather than have a misplay lead to a long inning that leads to the Nationals getting back in this game, they said, let's go for defense, and that's why I think Newbar pinch hit there. Nothing about Walker's offense, which, I guess you could make the case that he could have taken the AB, but they had brought a right-hander in, and so they're playing those platoon matchups, which Ollie Marmol has done with frequency. But Carlson, historically, I know we talked about it yesterday on B-Shape Daily, hasn't been the case this year against lefties, but Ollie trusting the history and putting Carlson in there today, rewarding his manager with a couple of home runs, DeYoung historically good against lefties, and Kiz has actually had good numbers against lefties. Brendan Donovan's going to hit you no matter who you are. So typically, Cardinals should be crushing lefties. Like, that has to be a part of their DNA as an offense. And so to be able to do it in the early innings, to an extent, it was mostly Dylan Carlson coming up with those that run support. But then to be able to tack on against the bullpen, really important for an offense. And, like, we're looking for these signs. I don't want to hear about, oh, well, it's just the Nationals. You can only beat who you play. That's the reality of the schedule, and you got to beat a lot of teams if you're going to get back from the cellar and the basement and the 15, 16 games below 500, whatever they were. They're down to 12 now, so I think it did get to 16 over the weekend. You got to beat who you play, and you can take positives even from beating up on bad teams. You can take away positive signs, and I think just the way the offense grinded away tonight, and you could make the case that they did the exact same thing yesterday. Very positive sign from this offense. This should be a top offense. This should be an offense that scores a lot of runs, that ultimately is able to be near the top of the league in terms of runs scored. And I want to try to take a look now, updated, get you what we can on where they rank, because I've made a lot of the fact that I think the Cardinals ultimately, well, that's not what we want. Ultimately, the Cardinals need to be like a top 3 offense at the end of the season is kind of the way I look at it. And whether or not that's even a possibility at this point kind of remains to be seen. But you look in terms of OPS, they're 9th right now in OPS. So 770 would get you into the top 5. Cardinals sitting here at 752, if I could highlight properly. Let's take a look at runs scored, because I think that's another factor that people would obviously be wondering about for this team. Where they at in runs scored? They're down at 11th right now. So I'm looking at this team needing to creep back into the top 5 or so at a minimum to not have a losing record. Now, the starting pitching and the bullpen could perform beyond its expectations and maybe change that trajectory for me, but I say that based on expecting, as I've reiterated time and time again, the pitching to be more in the middle of that pack, kind of 10th through 15th in somewhere in there. The offense is going to have to be what carries this team. So right now at 346 runs, it's in the top half, but I think to get this team where it needs to be, it just needs to be an overwhelming success offensively to where you're probably not touching these 2 teams, the Rangers and Rays, but the Braves, Dodgers, Diamondbacks for sure, and everybody in here. I think those teams are attainable if the Cardinals can continue to wrap off these 6, 7, 8, 9 runs scored type of outings. And you say, well, it shouldn't take that many runs to win a game on a given night. Yeah, maybe it shouldn't, but I think for this Cardinals team, that's the reality of kind of where they are and maybe where I expect them to be moving forward. So we'll see what ends up happening there, but that's kind of my impression of it. You've got this gap to make up in the standings. I think offensively is the way that it has to come for the Cardinals. Pitching can help that. I mean, having outings like you got tonight from Montgomery, giving him 7 strong, he's been really good again as of late. He had kind of fallen off. We know that he had, I think it was 10 straight games that the Cardinals failed to win for him. But you got that ERA now back below 4, 3.69, trying to get back to a strikeout per inning. This rotation in general doesn't miss bats very well. We know that. But we're seeing over his last 7 starts, that's those are solid numbers. A 3.2 ERA. Averaging, a little over 5.5 innings per outing over the last 7. A little bit uncharacteristic, I think, with the walk rate, but not terrible. Not anything that's too bad. But I think the whip ultimately could be closer to 1.1 for him, averaging about a K per inning over the past 7 games that he started. So getting better from Montgomery, and I mean we saw him really sharp tonight. So the starting pitching can be a factor. It can be something that certainly stabilizes and gets the Cardinals that little extra edge. But I think it's got to be the offense ultimately that propels them if they're going to get there. Let's get the likes up to 30, and we'll jump right back into the comments. I know we were kind of talking a little Dylan Dinger, and then I sort of went on the tangent. But I can talk about this. Like, when it comes to Dylan Carlson, I still think Paul DeYoung, Nolan Gorman is going to be a factor in terms of, like, all these guys sharing playing time. But when I look at Carlson, and I can pull his stats up because I haven't closed out the window, I still feel like this is a guy that he's 24 years old, and maybe you just play him and see what he is. Because I could understand that if you looked at last year's numbers and said, yeah, it's 696 OPS, he played a good bit. That was basically a full season. 432 ABs, close to 500 plate appearances. He played a lot last year. And those aren't really very impressive numbers. If one night can do this to his OPS, I know that the slug needs to be, that's where it needs to be. He needs to be a 740 OPS guy. And you're not always going to have 2 home run games to get you there if you're Dylan Carlson. But if I'm the Cardinals, given what he brings to the table defensively, I think you got to play him. Given his age, given his relative inexperience, I know last year was kind of rough. You got to consider maybe some of the injuries he was going through. And I also would make the claim that this team has not done anything. It has not gone out of its way to instill confidence in Dylan Carlson in terms of the opportunity that they're extending him relative to what they've done for Tyler O'Neill at times in the past. Relative to the way they're, Tommy Edmonds getting those opportunities. I think he deserves them, but I also would stump for Dylan Carlson a little bit to say, this guy was a top prospect. Maybe he was never that because of his overwhelming power and hit tool. I think he was solid in so many areas that you just thought he's bound to be a really quality major leaguer. And then we're seeing sort of underwhelming things from him at the plate. And that's maybe what the people would say that are not in his corner in terms of this guy just needs to be an everyday player. He's lost some of the shine to his status, and his luster is a little bit depleted. But I don't think that's through any major fault of his own. I think you can make the case that, all right, if this is the outlier season of 2022 that was injury-riddled, and can he be more like the guy he was in 21? If he was 266, 343 OBP, and a 437 slug for 780 OPS, you take that. You would take that 3 times in your outfield, especially with the defense that he brings. I would take that in each corner. I would take that in center field. I would even take what he's doing now as of tonight this season with a 742 OPS. I just think it's one of those cases where you got to just let him play and see what he is. And more than that, when I compare it to Paul DeJong, which is difficult because Paul DeJong, his OPS now is up to 770. I understand that. I understand that he's, starting to find it again, and he's a guy that can hit 25 home runs. He's done it before, and if he does it, he's got 11 this year. I would look at that and say, yeah, Dylan Carlson is not a huge candidate for me for a guy that's going to hit 25 home runs. I just don't know how likely it is because he's just not quite to that level of power. But could Dylan hit 15 to 20? Could he do it with really quality center field defense, which has value? Could he hit a lot of doubles? Could he eventually, 750, I think, is a sweet spot for an OPS of Dylan Carlson. DeJong can beat that because he's got more raw power. And, we've seen even recently the numbers are starting to creep back up for DeJong. It's not an anti-Paul DeJong take, but I would also mention this, that Paul DeJong's probably not going to be here next year. And I think for what he would have to do offensively to get the Cardinals to buy in on another year at that option price, which off the top of my head, I admittedly don't know what it is, but I think it's close to $20 million. It seems like it's going to be prohibitive compared to what I think they're going to count on getting from him in terms of value offensively. These are Paul DeJong's numbers here, 770 OPS. He was 531 OPS first season. They sent him to AAA for a lot of last year. 674 the year before, 671. You're talking about 3 full seasons, basically, and I know the COVID year kind of is cheating a little bit. But it's been really since 2019 since we've seen Paul DeJong performing at the level that he's doing now. And it's interesting, you look at the comparison of this year's numbers after tonight to what he did in 2019, it's almost identical. Same batting average, OBP within 13 points, 305 to 318. He's slugging 21 more points so far this year than he had been in 2019. But, that's about, you're seeing Paul DeJong back to those 2018, 2019 standards. Could he fall off again? Sure, but then he could also have a stretch where he hits a couple of home runs and he's right back to where he is. There's value to that, and there's value to what he brings because of his defense. Do I think it's going to be enough to get the Cardinals, knowing that they've got Mason Wynn on the way? Do I think it's enough to get Paul DeJong signed under that option? I really don't anticipate it. And so it's not like you're planning yet for 2024. You got to do whatever you think is best for this season. But I think Dylan Carlson could be a combination of best for this season and a legitimate force for 2024 in an outfield that you have no idea what to expect. They really like Lars Nootbaar, and so he's probably an everyday guy in their outfield next year. But beyond that, who do you have? Like Tommy Edmonds doing it right now, he could be called upon to be an infielder at any given moment. Same thing with Brendan Donovan, who's played some outfield and has done a nice job. But are you counting on Tyler O'Neill for next year? I can't imagine that you are. Jordan Walker is an interesting case. Is he going to be able to stick defensively in the outfield, or is he still going to be the kind of guy that they want to take out late in a game that they're leading because of concerns defensively? I don't really know. It's not fair to him to paint him in a bad light defensively. They kind of messed up and I think dropped the ball on the notion that they only had him 10 and a half months ago slated to play center or play the outfield for the first time. And he's learning and he's a good athlete, and I think he'll get better at it. But all this to say, like, there's only a couple of things that I would have to paint and say these go south instead of north in the offseason, to where suddenly your outfield is basically you've got a whole lot of nothing, or at least a whole lot of question marks out there. Wouldn't you like to know when it comes to Dylan Carlson whether or not he's going to be a solution, or whether you trade him, or whether he's a fourth outfielder? I think it'd be nice to know, and I don't think you can do that unless you play him. So that's kind of my thought process there, in conjunction with I think he can help you this year. Because he's a good defender, he can give you close to what Paul DeJong does offensively, and then you can find out maybe he's a legit center fielder and instill confidence in him. Do what you've done with other players like DeJong, like Tyler O'Neill, and maybe Dylan Carlson rewards you for that. But with the sporadic playing time, it's tough to expect him to be able to catch on. So that's certainly an aspect I'm thinking of when it comes to Dylan Carlson. But yes, we're a hashtag #EverydayDylanPod, so it should come as no surprise that we enjoyed seeing what Carlson provided for the Cardinals tonight, and he really did kind of set the tone, I thought, in a lot of ways. Childish Scambino says, if the Cardinals push their way to a playoff spot, do you think the front office still makes changes, or do they refrain? And Childish says, sorry for the loss, and I appreciate that. As I had mentioned, my Nana passing away on Friday has been sort of the reason we haven't been live recently, but, that's just it's a part of life, and we're all dealing with it, but appreciate you guys for all the support. That's been really cool of you, those who have reached out. When it comes to, say they make a push for a playoff spot, they're going to have to make changes regardless. Like, part of what's caused the problems this year was the inconsistency of the rotation, and they're not going to have those same starting pitchers next year, because we know Wainwright's retiring. We know Flaherty's likely gone. I expect Montgomery to be gone in free agency. So that's really 60% of your rotation. They're going to have to make changes in that regard, and I think stopgaps are a dangerous way to play it. That's why you're exploring Matthew Liberatore, to see if he can be one of those guys for you next year. You want to really take a look at what you've got in the prospects, the guys at Memphis, to see if they could potentially be something. It'd be nice if Dakota Hudson could round back into form, but guys, it does not look likely to me. He's really struggled in Memphis. He pitched again tonight, and I saw from, I think Kyle Reese was putting it together. I think he might have had a rough start, gave up a home run to the first batter that he faced, something like that. Don't know 100% how that outing finished up for him. I was going to look it up, but I'm not even going to bother. I just think it's been a rough go for Hudson, and I don't think you can realistically count him in on next year. I could see a scenario where Steven Matz comes to spring training looking for a starting spot back. I think it'd probably be a mistake. If you count him as your sixth starter going into next year, that's one thing. But if you're saying Steven Matz, we're penciling him in as one of our five, I think the Cardinals would. I think that's short-sighted, because they did it this year. I know you're paying him. I get it. But you're also getting $17.5 million off the books from Wainwright. You're getting, $10 million off the books from Jordan Montgomery, and Flaherty's making 5 or 6. So, there's money to play with for sure. And there's the fact that they touted how they'd raise the payroll, and then they did it by a little bit, and it went up infinitesimally. So you can raise the payroll more. Build-A-Wit, that's part of it, is spending. You got to spend in conjunction with what some of these other competitors in the NL are doing. That's part of it. And they tout that, well, over the course of time, we've been step for step with our payroll versus our revenues. And we've been in the top 12 or whatever are the things that they have said. I don't know the numbers offhand this year, but I think they're more like mid-tier, mid-pack, 15th, 16th in payroll this year. Somebody can check me on that. The payroll technically went up. The number did, but I don't think in conjunction with the wild spending you saw in the offseason by a lot of teams, which maybe that doesn't work out for everybody. I'm not advocating Build-A-Wit spend like the Mets owner Steve Cohen spent, because you got to spend good money. More than just doing it, it makes people happy to see you spend money. You got to spend good money as part of the equation. And, some of the money Steve Cohen spent may not be getting the return on that investment, because the Mets are a below 500 team right now, just like the Cardinals. So that's all got to be considered. But the question was about, will the front office make changes? I think they have to, but I also think the changes might not be as drastic as everybody. Like right now, 12 games below 500, everybody thinks the changes should be drastic. And if they finish that way, certainly that would be the case. But if they don't, it's because the guys they invested in, like Goldschmidt, Arenado, like some of the young players, Walker and Gorman that they've developed, Brendan Donovan that they've developed, Tommy Edman, they get credit for that as well. It would be that this group of position players put together a really nice run. It would be that their starting rotation that everybody has maligned pretty considerably through the early portion of the year actually settles into being a fine unit. It may not need to be sweeping changes, but it will need to be, you got to adapt eventually, because it's not enjoyable to have these runs in summer where you go, well, they look like the worst team in baseball for a time. How do you avoid that next time? I do think the model has to change. I do think that not change necessarily, but you got to update it. You got to update and upgrade the model, and you have to recognize that John Mozeliak is going to begin if it hasn't happened already, we wouldn't really notice the signs of this yet, but if he hasn't already done it, loosening the reins little by little of his control over this team and trust in the Mike Gershes and the Randy Floreses of the world to have a heavier hand in these decisions. It's not to say that they've just been sitting idly by twiddling their thumbs. Flores obviously very involved when it comes to the draft. That's been kind of his baby the last few years. And Gersh is, when people say, well, he's the GM, why wouldn't Gersh do more? He's working behind the scenes. You may not always see the moves that he's got a heavy hand in, because we basically, as a public, attribute everything to Mozeliak, because he's the guy with his name on the banner, right? He's got the headlining act, and that's the way we treat it. As anything, he's got final stamp of approval. But there are things that Mike Gersh is doing as well. But Mo, I think, as part of this model and as part of this will the front office make changes, I think he's got to adapt and recognize kind of what his role is going to be moving forward as he sort of lessens his control and command of this situation in this organization. Not because he's getting fired, but because, as he said in February, this is kind of the last go-around, is in no uncertain terms is the way it was described. Through 2025 is that contract. And so, yes, Childish Gambino, whether they make the playoffs somehow or not, I think you're going to see front office changes, and you're going to see the imprints and the fingerprints of other guys, other individuals that will kind of rise in power and in influence over this organization, for better or worse. That's the reality that's coming for the Cardinals. You might be a fan of Mo if they end up wrapping off 85 wins and winning this division one way or another, and maybe even making a run in the playoffs. Because you say, well, they don't have the pitching to compete in the playoffs. If Jordan Montgomery pitches the way he did tonight, and we've seen certain games from others like Flaherty and Michaelis that give credence to the idea that it could, you could put that together on accident for a couple of weeks in October, they could win some series and they could do some things, especially if everything's clicking offensively. Do I expect it? No. I mean, at this point, I say it's still kind of a longer shot that they would be able to pull off this division, but I've always been a little more optimistic, I feel like, than a lot of people who had sort of jumped off the ship. And I look at it right now as they've got about as good a chance as anybody. I'd put the Cardinals' chances above the Pirates. I'm inclined to put them above the Cubs and Brewers as well. I do think the Reds are somewhat genuine and legitimate. They could falter just the same as anybody else, but I look at Cincinnati adding as the season goes along in terms of young prospects. They brought up De La Cruz. Encarnacion Strand is another hitter that's been tearing it up in the minors. They do have the whole pitching situation to deal with right now with Hunter Green on the IL. I think they could make trades at the deadline for pitching if they really wanted to be aggressive. The Cardinals need to hope that the Reds this year do exactly what we saw the Orioles do last year and still sell off at the deadline, because they feel we're a little too early to this party. We don't want to sell out for right now when we have a long-term plan in place. And credit to the Reds organization for kind of turning things around. And if you heard the crowd tonight there when they knocked off the Rockies for 10 in a row, the crowd's getting into it. The fans in Cincy are good fans. They just haven't had a lot to cheer for in recent years. That could be a dangerous whole situation if the Reds fans get back into that building and start to support this team. That could cause ownership in the front office there to demand, like, you know what, we gotta help these guys out and give them a product because they're supporting us. Granted, the Castellinis, and he's the team president, and that's the son, and the owners of Castellini, and they've been, I mean, some of the comments that have been made publicly by those guys are just, it's been kind of a clown show the last couple of years. But if they start winning games, I'm not going to put it past them to potentially go, you know what, we could use as a pitcher or two. Like, I'm telling you, they need Montgomery and Flaherty. They need two guys like that, just rental pitchers. Not saying the Cardinals are going to send them mid-division, but two guys like that can just fill some decent innings in the middle of a rotation. And that could be the difference, I think, for the Reds to maybe actually make a push here. We'll have to wait and see, though. But long story short, there will be changes in St. Louis that the roster and the situation with the front office is going to demand it. It's going to dictate it. Jumping back into the comments, though, let's go ahead and do that. Tickets to London are cheap, said Ryan. What do you say, 110? I got to check that out. What do you say? $110. It's the travel that's expensive. Yeah, getting across the pond ain't easy. I won't be there. I got the baby at home. I'm not making that happen. But I do plan to hopefully go to Birmingham next year to cover that game. They just announced today, officially MLB announced the Cardinals will take on the Giants at Rickwood Field, I believe is the name of it. The Birmingham Black Barons used to play there. I think Willie Mays, his old stomping grounds. So kind of a really cool event they'll put on next year that the Cardinals get to be a part of. I think it's really neat when St. Louis gets to be involved in a lot of these kind of signature MLB events, they call them. No Field of Dreams game next year because I think they're renovating that venue. But the Rickwood Field, that'll be kind of cool. Birmingham, Alabama. See you on June 20th of next year, a year from today. Brian says starting to look like a ball team, stringing together hits, power, fighting back, and adding on through the game too. Yeah, again, you scored in 6 out of 9 innings. That's the key. That's the chef's kiss, as they say. So great point there by Brian. Feels good to finally see them beat a team they should be beating. That's where Jack feels about it. Yeah, I mean, not every team you play on the schedule is going to be a world beater. And sometimes you just gotta take it to the teams that aren't very good. And if you want to be considered not one of those teams, yeah, this is a kind of series that you probably need to sweep. Now that they've won the first 2, you absolutely do. You need to sweep the thing. You know, it's maybe asking a lot before you get into the series to say, hey, win 3 games in a row. But now that they've demonstrated what they can do in the first 2, I say it's a big one tomorrow afternoon to be able to get it and have a nice, happy flight over to London because, yeah, I mean, you got a couple of days off. The bullpen should be, I mean, I think even though Hicks threw 3 days in a row, you could see him tomorrow. You'll see Gio. You'll see anybody they need. Ollie should manage it like a playoff game. I mean, win that game, get even closer as you approach the series against the Cubs, and then you're going to have a bit of a stiffer test when the Astros and Yankees come to town following London. But that's the reality. You just got to go out there and play, get the confidence to be able to win the games against those better clubs. And it's going to be, again, it's going to be a grind. This is not going to happen overnight, but the more wins you can just rack up against bad teams, it's going to feel easier down the road. You'll be glad you did it if you're the Cardinals. And Childish mentioning the changes to the approach. Yeah, and we talked a lot about that, the approach, the model. I think some things are going to have to change. And that'll be true regardless of how this shapes up. Rob would venture the season cannot be salvaged without better pitching, but this lineup can finish the season from here on out, he says, as a top 5 offense without question. I agree with Rob on that. I say top 5 the rest of the way, but also I think overall needs to be top 5. So maybe they need to be top 3 rest of the way to get to top 5 because it's working now. You're in conjunction, pitching, offense, defense is looking a lot more stabilized, but the days are going to come where they play pretty well and they lose again, right? Right now they're getting rewarded for their good play. There was a time this year that when they played well, they weren't even getting rewarded for that. And so I really do think it's going to be, you got to be over the top in terms of like the quality of the offense, I think, in order to get where they want to go. Because they've dug a deep hole and just slugging the crap out of the ball is the way they're going to get out of it. I think they can. I would worry about guys like Nolan Gorman, though, because when I thought about this team being a top 3 offense, I thought Gorman was going to be a part of that. And right now, he looks like he's going up there with, without a bat sometimes. He just has not been effective, and I don't know what to expect moving forward. I was, touting my own pick of Gorman as an all-star there for a while. Doesn't look likely with the voting wrapping up in a couple of days, and he's just really fallen off the face of the earth. But for him to be able to maybe have a second-half renaissance, Wilson Contreras picking it up, and he's kind of closing in on 700 for an OPS as well, as you see there on the screen. If DeYoung is not going to fade into the ether, if Carlson can provide some spark as well, Arenado's going to have to get back going a little bit. 800 on his OPS. He's kind of fallen off a tad. He'll be there, though. Like, I agree with Rob. There's a lot to like about this lineup. They've just got to do it consistently, and they can't have another week where it's like, oh, no, we forgot how to hit this week. they've lost the privilege. I mean, they can't afford it anymore if they want to make the playoffs. Appreciate you guys for being here. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand new. Would love to get you guys on board. Brenden Schaeffer on YouTube, youtube.com/bschaeffer12, or I should say /@bschaeffer12 if you're listening on Spotify right now. Check out the YouTube and comment below with your thoughts on the Cardinals and whether or not this season is salvageable. I think we're in agreement, a lot of us, about the fact that it's got to come from the offense. The pitching's going to be a little bit what it is. Yeah, maybe you can try and reorient at the deadline, add some pitching. Remains to be seen maybe what the White Sox do. I don't know if they're trading to Dylan Cease. He pitched tonight and ends up White Sox winning that game. They're kind of back in the mix. So what aces will be on the menu when it comes to the trade deadline sort of remains to be seen. It's a good thing the Cardinals rotation is coming around because they may not have their pick of the litter in terms of the options. But we'll be talking about this team regardless the rest of the way. So would love to have you subscribe right here on the Brenden Schaeffer YouTube channel. 460-foot bomb was the monster. Carlson showed he has still got the power. I think it was 445 on the home run. Not quite 460, Hiru, but you know what? I'll take it. We can fudge the numbers if we need to because it supports our agenda. That's what it's all about. Robert chiming in, what's your take on the Cardinals fans are spoiled talk on Twitter? Yeah, I saw this from Randy Carricker the other day, and I know that's kind of what stemmed it. And then I responded a little bit to it without even knowing what was being discussed. Randy Carricker for 101 ESPN, longtime radio host in the St. Louis area, and long time, been talking about the Cardinals forever. But he made the comment that, and I think it was on a reply to Tom Ackerman. I was going to try to pull it up, but I can't find it. He made the comment that the Cardinals, basically by winning over the years as they have sort of inspired a spoiled, entitled fan base. And I think to say spoiled was maybe the inflammatory word that got people up in arms. I think what he was really just describing was the fact that, Cardinals fans expect to win. And he even said in the tweet, like, rightfully so, that's what's been kind of established here as a precedent. But he said a little losing once in a while could be good for the soul because you realize that the wins taste that much sweeter when you get them. I don't think it's as much about Cardinals fans. Like, the Cardinals fans demand the excellence, and he's right about that. They've been conditioned to do so because of the way the team has had success. To me, though, I don't necessarily love the comparison. Like, I think it was getting overblown. But the way I look at this season being a failure if they lose a bunch of games is because of, not like the fans expect to win every year, because they do, but like the team was talking at the beginning of the season, like, yeah, the fans should expect to win this year because we've got a really good roster coming in. That's the way the team kind of presented it. And so I don't think, I don't think it's anything over the top. But yeah, I look at this season and go, well, the reason the fans expect to win this year is because the team kind of told them that they should expect it. So, don't know what you think about that, but that's kind of the way I took it for sure. The thing I think I especially would agree with Randy on is Cardinals fans, they don't know how to lose because, like he said in some of his follow-up tweets on the topic, people 28, 29 years and younger like me just don't have any memory of the Cardinals as a losing team. It just has never really been the case. 2007, the one losing season that I can honestly remember in my lifetime. Was 1998 an actual losing season? Because I can remember that, but that was more about McGuire. I don't know what their final record was, but like that's kind of the point. Is it's really been a long time, and so I think a lot of people don't really know how to act. But because coming into this season they were expected to be good, it'd be different if they were like, this might be a step back this year. That's not the way the team presented it, and so I think it's fair to hold the team to the standard of like, look, yes, losing is okay every once in a decade, but if coming into a year it's, hey, we're billing this as expectations, then I think it's fair to hold the team to those expectations. Allison said, hey, like the stream and retweeted. Been looking forward to the stream. Appreciate you for being here, Allison, no doubt. Miles is excited to see some good Cardinal baseball. Felt proud to wear red today to work for once in a long time. Yeah, that's got to be nice, guys. It's got to be nice that you can maybe not feel like it's a brown paper bag. And I don't wear Cardinals gear. I'm not a Cardinals fan. I've talked about that before as my role writing about the team and covering the team has changed me from where I was when I was a youngster. But my son, Gabriel, family members and stuff buy him Cardinals gear. He's welcome to be a Cardinals fan. And he was wearing one of his Cardinals little outfits the other day, actually to the pediatrician appointment we took him to. And the pediatrician was commenting on that and was like, "Oh yeah, Cardinals." And I was like, "Yeah." I kind of made the joke that he already had a little poop on his outfit today, but it was just the Cardinals logo. It was a small joke, but that's kind of the way it probably feels for a lot of you guys in terms of wearing your Cardinals stuff. Now you can be loud and proud again. It's not like the brown paper bag era of 10-24 or whatever. This team's still got a long way to go, but they're really bouncing back in a way that I think is meaningful and will have a little bit of staying power. So I like that comment, Miles. Good point there. Hiru314 says we're going to 500. I can feel it. I think they do get back to 500. Whether they can do enough to get back to the division lead, if a team like the Reds takes off and finishes, 10 games above 500 at 86, 87 wins, the Reds and what they do at the deadline could really be a determining factor in this, because right now nobody can beat them. Allison says asks, has Hicks found his role 3 in a row? Yeah, he's the closer. There's no debate, there's no discussion. You can just look at what the Cardinal manager has done the last, few nights, and tonight he just simply was not available, and you didn't need a closer because you're up 6. But Jordan Hicks is the closer of the St. Louis Cardinals until further notice. Even when Ryan Helsley comes back, I think Helsley will be able to pitch the 9th because you're not going to be able to use Jordan Hicks every time necessarily. But Jordan Hicks is the most prized and prominent reliever in this bullpen right now. Full stop. There's no doubt. The manager of the team has showed you and told you with his actions the way they view it. And that's a little bit scary, I think, because of the inconsistency we saw from Jordan Hicks earlier in the season. But all that being said, he looks absolutely dominant right now. The 104 miles per hour that he threw to end the game last night was one of the sickest pitches I have seen all year in Major League Baseball. So if that is kind of what he needed to establish his swagger a little bit and get his confidence back, he'll still walk guys. He'll still hit batters as he did in one of those outings. He's not always going to have perfect command. I don't know anybody that can throw lightning bolts and always know where they're going to end up. And so that's kind of comes with the territory. But I think his stuff is moving so well right now that as long as he's throwing 102, 103, he's going to get away with missing location a little bit on occasion. And, he's found his role, Allison. He's the closer of the Cardinals. There's no doubt. Heidi Ho says, Corn, what's up, brother? 9 games back should be 19, but it's crazy they could easily go 7-3 and be reasonably within reach of the division title. Yeah, they could do that. It's going to take the Reds falling off a little bit, though. I get it. The Brewers are still right on their tail. I'll pull the standings up a little bit for you guys again, give you an idea of where things are. Brewers are just a half game behind. But you look at the 4-6 over their last 10. It's equal to what the Cardinals have done. But it's been the Reds, man, 10-0. It's hard to contend with that. The Chicago Cubs are 8-2, so keep an eye on them. The Pirates are done. That little L8, yeah, it's not good. That's not good for their hopes. But I really do believe that even though the Cardinals are in last right now, it would feel better to be above the Pirates and above the Cubs. And that's what makes London so huge. I know it's just a 2-game series, but beyond just the general momentum of showing the world that the Cardinals aren't trash this year on a larger, grander stage in Europe, getting those wins over the Cubs, I mean, that to win those 2 games versus a split versus, heaven forbid, a 2 losses out there, right now you're 4.5 behind the Cubs. Just doing some quick math. You're 8 back overall. They're 3.5 back. Yeah, that's going to be a really important 2-gamer for the Cardinals to be able to claim. And you certainly don't want to lose them both to go the wrong direction there. So I hear you. It could be worse than it is, but then again, you go 7-3. What would 7-3 do if they're that over their next 10? Which I don't know if that extends. You got 1 more in Washington, 2 against the Cubs, which is a total then of 3 games. And then let's just take the Houston and the Yankees series to get you to 9. You go 6-3 or whatever in that stretch. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of baseball they're going to have to continue to play. What's up, the Grave of Einstein with a super chat? Yeah, you guys are welcome to super chat. I'm not going to beg for it in every episode, but if you want to support the podcast and everything, that's one way that you can do it, and it guarantees you that I'll see your comment. So Einstein, appreciate you, brother, for that. He says, very interesting how they handle save situations when Helsley gets back. Hicks looks like 2022 Helsley on the mound, and Helsley hasn't all the time. Yeah, I mean, Helsley's numbers have been somewhat inconsistent. Was there this health issue that was going on that sort of leads to that to some extent? You can look at some of the recent outings. I mean, he's pitched well for the most part, but you see that was rough, and he had that stretch there, Dodgers, Reds, that was rough. What's his ERA for the season? 3.24 ERA, which is not anything close to what he was last year. And I agree with this. I mean, the 1.25 ERA, that's kind of what we've seen from Jordan Hicks over the past month and a half or so, right? So he's really settled into that role nicely. And it's nice to have a guy like him in the bullpen. I think the Cardinals are going to need more than just that. They need more than just one stud reliever. But I agree. Einstein, my opinion on it is Hicks is the guy until he loses the spot. Will Ryan Helsley pitch the ninth at times? Sure. But this team, I've been saying, you've got to have three dudes in the back of that bullpen. Any bullpen that wants to be truly successful, you've got to have three dudes that when your starter goes 6-2 and it's a 3-2 lead, you got to know that game's over. You got to be able to go 7, 8, 9, and I think Gio can get there, bridge the gap, and then you maybe go Helsley, you maybe go Hicks. Like on a given day, they'll decide how to handle those last 3 innings. But that's kind of the blueprint that the Cardinals are looking to set up. And right now, with the way Hicks is throwing the ball, you ride that until the wheels fall off. And the wheels very well may fall off. Jordan Hicks has had times where he's been inconsistent in the not-too-distant past, obviously. And so it's a possibility that he won't look this dominant for the rest of the year. And it's also possible they don't get Helsley back. I don't know if there's been like a grand update. I'm not obviously in D.C. covering the team. And so we'll kind of see what ends up happening when it comes to Ryan Helsley moving forward, and how much of an opportunity to really get back on the field he's going to have. With the forearm strain, the talk was maybe that it was going to just be kind of have some rest and see where he is. But even if he comes back within the next 2-3 weeks, which I wouldn't anticipate, but it's possible, if everything goes well, but how many times does it with a forearm strain just, oh yeah, the timeline was he just needed a week of rest and he's good to go. Even if that happens, Jordan Hicks is the closer. I'm not even speculating on that. It's just he is, and they'll also trust Helsley obviously to throw in the ninth inning. But bullpens are fickle, relievers are fickle, and closers in particular can be fickle. And when you've got one that's just absolutely owning his role, you don't touch that. You don't mess with it. So to me, Hicks is going to be the guy even after Helsley comes back. Which is not to say that Helsley won't be trusted in late innings. He still will be, but that's very much a hypothetical at this point, whether or not they get him back right away. Brian says, how about Monty? Would have liked to see him in the 8th. Verhagen was serving up meatballs. Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to stretch Montgomery beyond the 7 innings tonight. You had that big lead. Let's make sure we know. It's 94 pitches. The last time that Monty had thrown 97 pitches, and I asked him about, should you have gone back out? He said, well, I was over 100 pitches, so it's fine. I think you get him right up around 100. You're cool with that. You got to preserve him for the long run of the season. And where the game was at that point, what was it, 7-2, 7-1 at that point before they scored in the 8th. I'm cool with that. I was cool with it. Got to get those guys a little bit, rested, make sure they're good to go every 5th, and get guys like Verhagen and Woodford into games that, they're not going to pitch tomorrow. Tomorrow, you're going to need to throw your top guys, I think, if you're Ollie Marmol. And so I don't have a problem with what they did with the pitching staff today. Jake, what's going on? He says, Carlson stabilizing an outfield position is huge. Him and Nootbaar along with Donovan may be the best option. DeYoung, a short Walker at DH. Yeah, I've said Walker at DH, but I recognize that long term they don't want to just turn him into a DH. And the offense fits better if he can play a corner outfield and do it well. I'm not talking for this year, but I mean long term, because then they can afford to either plug a Gorman at DH if long term he looks suitable to it. And he looks nice at second base as well. Or, heaven forbid, what if they really trust Nolan Gorman's offense to not just go into a dark cave from time to time as it has recently, and he can come out of that and stay stable? I'm not saying you want to trade Edman or Brendan Donovan, but if there's a team out there that goes, yeah, we'll give you this starting pitcher for that, I mean, you have to consider all options, and it helps the Cardinals to know, well, if Walker can be really legitimate, not just offensively, but defensively in a corner outfield spot, if Lars Nootbaar is able to handle what we think he can handle, and Dylan Carlson, I think, could do it in center, but I could also see him being a trade chip if he's able to show enough value. Tonight did not hurt in that category. I think those are all important things. But down the road, it could mean if you have a DH opening to just sign a bopper and be able to really just plug a dude in who's maybe, as Goldschmidt kind of wanes a little bit, important. Eric says, love the shows. No, we have no bearing on personnel, but personally, trade deadline is sell high on DeYoung. Won't happen. Then let Carlson play every day. Injuries are his only roadblock. Yeah, I mean, hopefully this didn't burn us here. I think it might be burning us. Oh, boy. Hopefully this doesn't kill us. Are we dead? Are we dead? I hope we're not dead. I'll have to track down what's his name that just did that chat, Eric Bishop. I want to try to knock down some of the things that we're using here, if that can help. But, sometimes we just don't get the luck. But I appreciate Eric on the live chat there with the super chat. Thanks, brother. Go ahead and comment if you're still able to see it. Jack can hear me. Eric is wondering if his super chat crashed the stream. We have some poor quality. Hopefully, we can get back to excellency. Would be very nice to see that. But I want to at least address Eric's question because I think it's a good one. And if we end up dying, I did want to kind of wrap up after an hour, and we're kind of there anyway. Always at bschaefer12 to let me know if you've got comments, because I know there's a lot of good comments that we've missed. But selling high on DeYoung just feels difficult. You'd almost need a contender that has an injury at shortstop, and they would say, bang, this is the move that we've got to make. We've got to add this Paul DeYoung just for a short-term benefit. And I think that can be so tricky to find that deal and to know that the Cardinals, I think it makes sense from the Cardinals standpoint if you can get anything for him. But I just don't know what you can. And so if you're selling high, you're doing it because you can get something for a guy. And the moment you trade away depth as well is when you wish you had it again. Carlson, let's say, would start playing poorly. Tommy Edman would get hurt. Now you have to call up Mason Wynn. You don't think he's ready. Like, there could be a lot of things that happen at once that you could regret trading away somebody like that. I think you ride DeYoung till the wheels fall off. I really do. And if the wheels do fall off, well, you probably don't have any trade value for him, but that's not the end of the world as the connection just returns. So we like that. It's not the end of the world if you end up not getting anything for Paul DeYoung. Sometimes with certain guys, I just think that's the way that you play it because he could catch fire for a little bit and carry you. Just imagine a scenario where DeYoung just has a so-so season, but you do sneak into a wild card series and he hits 3 home runs in 2 days. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but doesn't he strike you as the type that could surprise and do something like that? So I don't know how legitimate those possibilities would be, but I do agree with Eric. Like, you let Carlson play every day. He hasn't been hurt really this year, and I think Dylan Carlson is a guy that deserves more opportunity from the very beginning of this season than the Cardinals have been willing to extend to him. I understand the reasons. I understand the impediments and the fact that they really wanted to invest in a guy like Tyler O'Neill to begin the season. I just don't really think that it was the way to go. And in retrospect, now we can see that it probably wasn't the way to go. And now you have an opportunity to fix that, but it's like they're still looking in other directions. They're looking at Paul DeYoung. They're looking at Tommy Edman. They're looking at all these other things where it's like, yeah, those are good. Tommy Edman should play every day. Brendan Donovan should play every day. That's part of the thing that we go back to in the offseason, though, is like they had a logjam of these position players that they could have resolved and didn't. And so it's really tricky. Eric, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for the super chat. I think we see the situations rather similarly. I just wonder if Paul DeYoung is actually a guy they could get anything for at the deadline. That's really all that keeps me from thinking that what you suggest there is possible. Einstein says we talk about trading depth because outside of the outfield, there really haven't been too many injury openings this season. And that's true. And like the moment it happens, you probably end up, bam, you're injured again. And Eric mentions the ankle injury. Dylan just did come off of the IL. His numbers since coming off the IL are good, though. And he mentions that Dylan was just turning it around when that injury happened, and I think he's right about that. Just like last year with his wrist injury came when he was starting to get a little bit hot. Yeah, it's been really bad timing, bad luck, and I wish the Cardinals would kind of see through that a little bit to go, this guy's 24. Why don't we invest in him and treat him like a top prospect? Because that's what he used to be. Yeah, I could totally get on with that. Aaron says our luck would be to send DeYoung and he's back to being an all-star. Then fans would use that as a way to attack the front office for not getting enough for him. The only difference is there, like, I don't think anybody in their right mind will look at the end of the season and go, oh, the Cardinals are dumb if they don't pick up a $20 million option for DeYoung. I think everybody, including the Cardinals, including Paul DeYoung, is going to kind of see the writing and go, I had a really nice season, but are they going to just pick up that option? No, they're going to decline it. Do they see enough in DeYoung to want to sign him to a more reasonable contract in the offseason? Maybe. It's possible. I think it's interesting, too, though, that you look at Brandon Kiley, who put this out today. I guess we're not looking at Brandon Kiley, but we're looking at the tweet that he sent as it pertains to Paul DeYoung in the shortstop market and things of that nature. Going to see if I can pull that up. Because a lot of the free agent shortstops that a lot of us were kind of clamoring for the Cardinals to say, hey, it might make sense to go to go get one of these guys. Those guys have actually not been performing at a very high level this year. And Paul DeYoung actually kind of takes the sweepstakes when it comes to those comparisons. BK, if you can see it on your screen now, he put the tweet up today. And he says, here's Paul DeJong's numbers with the 770 OPS. Dansby Swanson's at 750. Xander Bogaerts is at 743. Carlos Correa at 711. Trey Turner, oh my goodness. A 673 OPS. The power has flat out not been there, and he hasn't been able to get on base at a very high clip either. I mean, those are things that I just didn't really expect when I was saying, yeah, Trey Turner's the best pick of the litter this offseason. So, like, the point of all of this and bringing this up is that Paul DeJong's production relative to what they could have done and gone out and gotten has been actually pretty good. And I don't think anybody thinks he's a bad defensive shortstop. But is he enough to continue to contribute to this logjam? Is he enough to say, Mason Wynn, we're going to keep you down in Memphis for another year if he looks ready? I think he's a really nice player. They shake his hand. If he finishes with a 770 OPS, they shake his hand and say, you earned yourself a nice contract somewhere and you'll be remembered fondly. I just don't think he's necessarily in the fold long term unless he takes a team-friendly multi-year deal because it's just whatever he's going to be owed for next year under that option is just too much, I think, for them to pay it. Mullins says, Aaron says if he continues to play every day, he's going to take 450 ABs and homer 30 times. Kind of crazy. And guys, can we kind of think back to the fact that my non-bet has life where the guy said he was going to Venmo me $1,000 if Paul DeJong ended up with 400 plate appearances and a 750 OPS? Because he's tracking right now. If he just hits a few more bombs, he really might have that OPS. He's at 770. I was a little more worried about the plate appearances, but maybe that's the upside. I'm like literally trying to talk myself out of $1,000 based on the way I say give Dylan Carlson Paul DeJong's playing time more often than they're doing it. But that's interesting. I guess we'll see. Einstein adding that 450 PAs, 30 homers, and $50 to Brenden Schaeffer. Brother, it wasn't $50. The dude said 1,000. If there was an update, Einstein, on that where he went back on it and said 50, then let me know. But I'm pretty sure he said he was going to send me $1,000. And again, this was not me betting. This was not a bet. This was a dude that I think Sean tweeted at me and said, as I was talking up Paul DeJong, he said, if this happens, I'll Venmo you. And sure as shooting, he's kind of in the mix on it right now. Paul DeJong. I got to look to see what he's at in terms of plate appearances on the season. Because the OPS, I mean, again, the way he runs randomly into home runs, which is kind of taking away from what he does. It's not random, but he's a good mistake pitch hitter, as he's always been. Unfortunately, MLB.com does not show plate appearances, but if he's got 170 ABs, how many walks does he have? Only 14, is that right? Paul, come on, brother. So he's closing in on 200 ABs, or 200 PAs, I should say. And yeah, if he gets there by the end of June, then he'll be tracking for at least 400. I might be in the running on this money. We'll see. Yeah, so the PAs are closer to 185, 190. Jack's going to send me $1 if Dylan dingers again tomorrow. Well, there you go. I love the bets where I don't have to say anything. I just get money. That's awesome. Eric says, I know Mo would hate to do it, but trading for Aroldis Chapman and one more right-handed reliever would make the bullpen good, and it would help the starters. Yeah, I agree. They won't do it. They'll never trade for Aroldis Chapman, but you get a stud lefty like that and a stud righty, and now your bullpen goes 5 deep on guys you trust. That's a playoff contending bullpen, and that's the way I prefer teams to handle their relief corps. Don't ever sign a $14 million reliever in the offseason. Don't sign Andrew Miller. Don't sign Greg Holland. Don't sign, Steven Matz. I mean, they didn't think he was going to be a reliever. Don't sign Brett Cecil. Wait till the middle of the season, figure out who the good ones are, and then acquire them. I know it costs you players, but the only way to know that a reliever is going to be good is to watch him during the season and say, okay, he's good this year. Let's get him. Because next year, that guy's going to turn into a bucket. Like you're not even going to be able to rely upon him. That's the nature of relief pitching. It's very fickle. And so don't pay a guy on a multi-year contract. Trade for the good ones. And, or do what the Royals did and identify short-term value. Like, what was Aroldis Chapman's contract? Because I can't imagine it was much. I know it was a 1-year deal, $3.75 million. Sign like a couple of those, and maybe one of them works out. The other one doesn't. You just cut the guy and trade for the guy to fill his spot. That is the way I would always advocate filling the bullpen every time. Subscribe to the Be Safe Daily podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you enjoy daily Cardinals content, I don't know why you wouldn't. But sometimes it just takes me asking in a nice voice for you guys to subscribe. So would love to have you guys on board. And once again, if you're viewing right now, you haven't subbed, do so, wait 60 seconds, and then say, hey, I'm new in the live chat, and I'll try and find you. Ryan was in support of the Chapman move a month and a half ago. Yeah, I just don't think he's a Cardinal kind of guy, with some of the off-field issues he's had in the past. I would be surprised. But from a on-field standpoint, as much as it pains me to say it, it does make sense. Jared, what's up, man? He says, I'm watching for the beginning, but I'll be watching the live streams in the future for sure. Jared, I want to welcome you. If you get to this late in the pod, thank you for being here, my friend. Timothy says the camera's back. Yeah, it was buggy for a little bit there. I was seeing it on my end too, and I just wasn't sure we were going to make it to the other side. But we did, so I appreciate that. Aaron says it's almost like the Cardinals were not totally off base during arbitration with Helsley, saying you've been good literally once, and that he needs to continue to be a solid contributor. Actually, I don't know if he's talking Helsley or Tyler O'Neill at that point with Aaron, but either way, I kind of agree. Helsley, I think, got a little bit of a raw deal because they told him you weren't durable enough after they talk all the time about how they needed to protect him and keep him fresh. But I think if you read between the lines on that a little bit, Helsley was asking for a lot of that protection in the other year. And to his credit, I think this year he really tried to be that more durable, more reliable guy. But then maybe it got him hurt. And so there's kind of a little bit of a tricky situation on that one. Ryan, I don't want to talk smack on any fellow media folks. I like everybody in town, but I see your comment. Rickwood Stadium game is going to be super cool. Yeah, I agree with that. Stadium looks like it still was in the 40s. I don't know if they'll do any upgrades, Eric, or not, but I'm excited. I really do want to get to Birmingham for that one next year. And as Eric mentioned, we should get the likes up to 50. I know we're at 38 right now. I would settle for 40. Probably going to get out of here pretty quick, but I'm trying to scroll to see if anybody's comments I really missed that I haven't gotten to read yet. Brent was here tonight. What do you think needs to happen to get Wynn called up? He's been on fire lately. As is Ivan Herrera. Yeah, that's a little tricky for Andrew Kisner because I think Andrew Kisner has a lot of value as the backup catcher on this team, but you're not going to carry three catchers, and they signed Wilson Contreras for 5 years. Like, that was the decision they made. I think they were doing that, completely counting out that Ivan Herrera would be able to put it together the way that he has. OPS of like 940, I want to say he's got with Memphis right now. So I have no idea what they're going to do with that. They cannot option Herrera again next year. And so that could get a little bit dicey. And doesn't it feel like you wish you just had the ability to, and again, I love what Contreras brings. I think he's got great energy. I think he can help out offensively ultimately. But couldn't you look at that and say, man, could they have spent $87.5 million somewhere else if they would have known that Herrera was going to turn out to be maybe a legit hitter? And I think a lot of what they didn't like about him last year was his game presentation and his ability to handle the staff, which is some of the stuff that they were maybe worried about earlier this season with Wilson. But like Herrera Kisner for a couple years would not have been the worst thing in the world. I really don't think it would have been. And I think you might have gotten a nice little boost offensively. Now they're going to probably, Herrera's a trade chip. I really think that's possible. Andrew Kisner is a trade chip if they decide to go that route. But I think you trust in the stability of Kis, and maybe you sell high on the offensive production in Memphis from Herrera. I don't know if there's a lot of a market for him out there. They once sold Carson Kelly and got a Paul Goldschmidt in that deal. So if you can do something like that again, not saying those deals come around every year, but I could see Herrera, if he's got the cachet in the eyes of your rival executives, as they always say, then maybe that is a consideration. But yeah, Mason Wynn was the actual question that Brent asked, and I think what has to happen is him to have a spot to play. If DeYoung gets injured tomorrow, Mason Wynn's going to London. Like, really, I think that's a possibility. If Tommy Edman gets injured, that's a little trickier right now because he's viewed more like an outfielder. That might mean Moises Gomez is going to London, or that random dude Palacios that they picked up from the Guardians goes to London. He's probably going on the taxi squad regardless. Mason Wynn, it really does boil down to me when it comes to his opportunity. Like, will Mason Wynn get a chance to play? It's just, you got to have somewhere to put him. I want to look at his numbers. I haven't really seen and kept up. I know his numbers have been going up. He's got a 710 OPS in Memphis. He's hitting 260. It's just about kind of coming into that power. But he's 21 years old. He's playing at a AAA level and is really holding his own. 7 homers, 13 steals. I assume a sterling defensive shortstop. I know they put him at second. They kind of move him around because they know it may need to be the case that he plays in a little bit of a different area every day if he were to get the call. I think he'll be up before you know it. It's just it may take an injury in the middle infield this year to have it happen before like September. But the more he can knock on the door with consistent offense, I think the more he will be unignorable for this Cardinals front office in making that decision. CJ correcting me perhaps and saying that Dakota Hudson pitched very well tonight for the Memphis Redbirds. So maybe I do need to pull that up and see what his numbers ended up being. Cardinals, the Redbirds won 8-5 tonight. Dakota did pick up the win. His ERA is around 5.5, so that's a little rough. Let's see here. Mason Wynn had a nice game, couple of runs scored. Yeppy still down there. Moise Gomez, did he go yard tonight? No, but he did have a base hit. Let's see here. We're gonna find the Dakota stats. 5 innings, 2 runs, 8 Ks, and that home run that was allowed that I had mentioned previously. Stick with me for 10 more minutes, YouTube. That's all I ask. There's Dakota Hudson. I think it doesn't like when we continue to add things and add windows. I need a new computer. I know it. So yeah, decent for Dakota. There's a world in which the Cardinals look at it next year and say, well, Dakota Hudson, we've still got him because I think he's retroactively going to be Super 2 eligible and he'll be still with the Cardinals and have another year, kick that cane down the road for free agency. But I mean, the 5.5 ERA in Memphis is kind of a bummer to think, yeah, they're going to give him a rotation spot next year. That would tell me the rotation is, maybe, I don't know if it'll be better or worse next year, but if you had Hudson as one of your 5, you had Steven Matz as one of your 5, or if those guys were both part of your 5 next year after Flaherty, Montgomery, and Wainwright leave, you're cheaping out as an organization. I do think they need at least one bona fide dude to add to Michaelis, and then you can have a lot of those other guys compete, Liberatore included, maybe Graceffo, maybe McGreevy included. Matz, I guess, can compete, but I think if you go that route with too many of those spots for next year, the front office is going to have the money. Ownership is going to have the money. But I'm rooting for Dakota Hudson. I like Dakota Hudson. It's just we haven't seen the consistency from him. Brent says if Edman is going to become an everyday outfielder, does that shift how the team views Dylan and Donnie at the deadline? The way they view Donnie is he's untouchable. I can tell you that right now. And yes, it might shift the way they view Dylan, though. I think that's a possibility. They might view him as, hey, everybody out there, do you like this guy? Okay, he's a little more expendable on our end. We're not going to tell you that, but we'll trade him for you if you give us what we want in the way of a good pitcher. That's possible. BN says, look at Gorman's minor league numbers and scouting reports. He is what you see, and not as fast as DeYoung. Well, I mean, DeYoung's a shortstop, Gorman's a second baseman, so that's not really the same thing. But yeah, he's going to be kind of a streaky hitter. I think it's possible. Eric says that Gorman's just too young to be a known. Yeah, we don't know for sure what he is, so I think that's a possibility as well. DeYoung has been very good defensively. I think that's worth pointing out, and Aaron has done so. He's always been good there. And for what it's worth, the home runs, he's on a good pace on those. And, yeah, I mean, I think it's been legitimate for him with what he's been able to do defense, offense. Yeah, Waino will get to 200, Allison. No concern on my part about that. He's at 198. He's not going to be benched anytime soon. And he had one of his better starts. Finally had a quality start over the weekend in New York. So, yeah, Waino will get to 200. Barring injury, he'll get there. CJ wants to lock up Monty for 3 to 5 years. I am skeptical over whether that will happen. I think he's going to go to the highest bidder in the offseason. And being a Boris guy, as I believe he's a Boris guy, right? I think that's going to be tricky. Do I think with travel, with the London series affecting the team once they get back? It could, Allison, because I think they only have one day off in the aftermath of the London series. But I think ultimately the fact that they get 2 days on the front end, 1 day on the back end, it could be a little bit interesting to see how flat or on top of things they look coming into the Astros series that follows there, that first game at Busch early that next week. I think that's on a Tuesday. But all in all, I guess it's a possibility, but it's hard to speculate about a ton about that. Eric also wants 3 to 4 years with Montgomery. I think Montgomery could probably get 5 to 6 years on the open market. But I like what he brings too. I just don't know if being a Boris client, if it's going to be in the cards. He talked as though he wishes he was kind of upset about the fact that they didn't get anything done before the season. Not upset, but he said, well, we didn't do it. They didn't offer before the season, so we're just going to let it go to the end, which is fine. I don't know what else he would be supposed to say about that. But was he actually mad? Was he? I don't know. I think he was going to probably try to test free agency anyway. That's what Boris wants a lot of his guys always to do. Joshua chiming in, you commented on this on Twitter already, he says, but I'd be interested to hear the talk more about the 2024 team should be better so they aren't trading Goldie and Arenado. Well, I mean, I think they've underachieved to this point. You look at run differential, isn't that a factor in kind of where things have been, I want to say? So let me just kind of pull up the standings if I can here, because I believe that run differential is usually included on that page for MLB.com. A lot of the metrics, and I think, Joshua, you're somebody that subscribes to a lot of these different kind of underlying numbers, would tell you that the Cardinals should not be 12 games below based on a lot of different aspects. Okay, they're negative run differential by 7, but that's way better than the Pirates. It's better than Milwaukee. It's better than Cincy. Somehow the Cubs have a plus 21. But I would say that I just don't think, first of all, the Cardinals are as bad as they've played. I think their record in one-run games, I may not be able to pull that up on this, but that's been a huge factor in the struggles. And it's kind of, a lot of people would say, well, that's a sign you got a bad manager or underperforming players. And I'd say you're probably right about the underperforming aspect. But to be 8-16 in one-run games, man, the Cardinals are a good team. I still believe that they've got a lot of good players. In those 24 one-run games, they should at least be 12-12. Like, that's just like a median expectation, in my opinion. So if they're 12-12, okay, now suddenly their record is 35-39. And we're not looking at this team like the sky is falling and like they stink. I came into this season thinking the Cardinals were the best and most talented team in the Central. I still think that on paper they might have the most talent in the Central. But we haven't seen enough of their players, and this was the terminology I used all offseason. Will these guys that you pencil into their lineup meet their median expectation for their season? I would say Donovan right now, just a snapshot with those numbers, is doing that. DeYoung certainly is doing that. Carlson, after tonight, is doing that. Before tonight, I would have said no. Nootbaar, I would say not quite, but he'll get there. Walker, certainly meeting median expectation. Contreras, absolutely not, and he was the most important player of their offseason. So that's a big, big mark where I feel like when he gets it back, and he probably should, he's still in his prime ages, and he's never been this bad before, I think you can probably count on Contreras being a better contributor, and it's going to be really interesting. I mean, you're going to notice how much longer the lineup looks when he's chipping in for a 750, 760 OPS like he should be. Arenado, no, I would say he's not quite met his median expectation, but he could get there. And at times, a week ago, it looked like he was, but he needs to be more like 850 OPS. Goldschmidt, sure, he's meeting it. And Edman, he's coming close. So it's not looking as bad as it had been, but these guys are kind of bunching this up in spurts where really, really bad, nobody's hitting, everybody's hitting, life's good again. But there are some key configurations here of guys, and Tyler O'Neill is a huge glaring one that is not meeting that median expectation, and he was gifted the center field job to start the season. So when you look at the losing this team has done, I'm not pinning it all on that guy's shoulder and he's hurt, but he has like a 620 OPS and is absolutely underperformed what they thought they were going to get out of him. And Contreras. Those are two huge ones. And then you look at the rotation. Monty, yeah, I think he's to the point where you would say he's hitting on that median expectation. But elsewhere in the rotation, I think it's going to be a whole lot of negative ghostwriter in terms of, do I believe these guys have panned out to kind of the median expectation that I would have for their performance this year? Because I thought on paper they had enough guys to where, if enough of them just hit on what would be kind of the mid-level expectation. Montgomery has. Michaelis hasn't. He's a sub-4 ERA guy for sure. Jack Flaherty absolutely has not. At a 4.95 ERA, he just has to be more consistent than he's been. And we'll go to all players so that we don't just get to look at the guys who have qualified. Helsley? No, probably not. And not healthy. That hurts you. Gio, yeah, has been about that. Hicks, about that. Stratton, Palante, they're right about that. But if that's the case, none of those guys are super exciting, right? I already said Michaelis was a no. Cabrera has fallen short. Steven Matz, woefully short. He's knocked out of the rotation for good reason. Wainwright, woefully short. So, and Liberatore, I thought he would be able to do more than what he's brought with a 6 ERA and maybe still will be. But that's kind of the way I look at it with a lot of these guys, and maybe offensively, I don't know if there's anything that I've really been missing. Guys based on injury. Gorman was not in the lineup today, and I would say, yeah, he actually has hit on that median expectation, but just barely. So, like, Josh, to answer your question, man, like, I have more faith in the players than what a lot of them have put out, and I think when I'm looking at these numbers offensively and the guys that I expect, like the guys that have fallen short, Newbar a little bit short, Wilson Contreras woefully short, I expect both those guys to be better. I don't expect a lot of O'Neill, but I think they've got other ways to cover for that. And so, that's kind of where it comes from for me, is you got at least two guys that were supposed to be two of your best, I would say 5 to 6 players offensively this year, that have been two of your worst. One of them, I'm talking O'Neill and Contreras. One of them, Contreras, I expect to kind of round into form. The other one, they may trade him. They may, whatever may happen with Tyler at this point. I'll be rooting for him, but it's been a tough go of it for him the last couple of years. So that's part of it with me, where I just think this team's better than they've showed. I think they've been very fluky in the one-run losses. That's contributed to it as well. And I think they were a little short-sighted in the way they approached the pitching situation. Do I have more faith than I should in the notion that this front office can fix the pitching by trading for somebody and maybe signing somebody else, signing the right guy? Like, they need to find the Nate Eovaldi of this upcoming offseason and sign him. I don't know what Eovaldi's contract was. I guess I could try and Google that real quickly. 2-year, $34 million. So it's not like the Rangers spent nothing on Eovaldi. Is that right? Because I saw December 2021, if that was what it was. No, that's right. I think that's accurate. They signed him in December. So, like, they got to find and spend effectively on those guys. You spent $17 million this offseason on Adam Wainwright, and Eovaldi signed for the same amount and has been really sharp. Has Wainwright been sharp? No. Could he get better? You better hope so. But was there any world in which I would have said don't sign Adam Wainwright? No, I really thought that signing Wainwright was an important aspect of closing the circle, Cardinal career. Like, there's a lot of reasons to keep him and don't make it about the money. But has that had an impact somewhat? Yeah, sure, because he hasn't lived up to expectations yet. But it's a long answer, Josh, but I really feel like you're not trading Goldie and Arenado, because I do think this team should expect to say, where are we deficient in this offseason? Let's say they win 79 games. That wouldn't be great, but they would be able to overhaul what has been an inconsistent pitching staff. Wainwright has struggled, and if he looks better by the end of the season, you're going to win more than those 79 games. Jack Flaherty has been a drag on the team. I mean, he's got a 4.95 ERA. He could absolutely be a plus by the end of the season, but for right now, you just can look at what the numbers are and say he's pitching more like a number 4 or number 5, and they need him to be the number 1. So you want to talk about the margins and the reason this team is where they are instead of where they should be. I don't think it's that difficult. I can chalk it up to about 4 things. 1, the record in one-run games, which I think is fluky. 2, Jack Flaherty needed to – how many times in the offseason did we say Jack Flaherty developing back into that number 1 would be a key to this offseason and a key to the 2023 campaign? He hasn't done it consistently. His ERA is 4.95. I give him credit for the way he battled through in his last start after a really rough first 2 innings against the Nationals, but his numbers are his numbers. And so that's number 1. Tyler O'Neill falling woefully short is number 2. Wilson Contreras falling woefully short to this point is number 3. And I would even put Wilson maybe at the top. It's definitely more detrimental than what O'Neill has been, because they do have other options in the outfield. They're throwing Tommy Edman there as proof. But those 3 things, those are really the 4 things. The 3 players, Contreras, Flaherty, O'Neill in that order, and the one-run game record. I mean, if you're just average, they're right in the mix in the NL Central, and they haven't been. They're 8-16, one of the worst records in one-run games in the league. So knowing that they needed to have done more to address the pitching, knowing what the constraints were of, hey, Adam Wainwright's going to be one of your 5, whether he should be or not, and I think he should have been. I think he can still pitch better than he has. He looked good against the Mets, and so I'm not counting him as a drag, but he's been a drag so far. If your ERA is 5.5, your ERA is 5.5. And so I look at the fact that whether you think Wainwright and Flaherty are going to turn things around or not doesn't really matter. They have a chance in the offseason to fill those 2 spots with better options, more consistent options. Whether that ends up being Wainwright coming back himself because he ends up with a 3.9 ERA after just going hog wild the rest of the year. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying if you're just removing one guy from a spot and saying, who can we pluck in here? There's opportunity to fix the pitching, in my opinion, compared to what has caused them to get into this spot in the first place. Steven Matz is another example. If I was going to add another name, like he was given that rotation spot and fell woefully short. So now we're up to 4 to 5 guys that have fallen really short of their expectations. About 60% of the rotation it applies to. And, you can kind of look in the bullpen and say, yeah, we kind of knew who the bullpen was going to be. And largely they've been just fine, near expectations, but nothing special, not anything that was going to take this unit and put it over the top as a roster. So that's what it is to me. The Cardinals should be right around 500 right now with the way they've played, and it would feel a lot differently than it does. But it is what it is. But that's what I'm looking at. I mean, you're talking about 25 or 20% of the roster falling woefully short. That's how they've gotten where they are. Combine that with the one-run games, it's a problem. But if I compare that to what I expect for next year, I think I'm still going to buy into this team as long as they invest in pitching in a better way. And it doesn't mean necessarily spend more money. You spent $17 million on Waino, 10 on Monty, 5 or 6 on Flaherty. Spend that 32 better next year. You don't have to spend more. You should spend 40 instead of 32 on those 3 spots. Whatever it is that you do, be effective with it, I think is what the Cardinals really would need to do. And if they do that, I do think it can make a difference. Give me one moment for a drink of water. I'll be right back. Oh, man. I don't know if you guys have been hearing me there for a little while. That's rough. If it's been on B Shafe Daily Live and you haven't been hearing the entire conversation of the of talking about the rotation, I apologize for that. That's a little bit rough. We had everybody chiming in on CJ's thoughts on the rotation. I had the microphone turned off, I think, for a little bit, so I apologize about that. Anthony had been chiming in. They keep signing 3 mid-tier starters for the price of one great guy and banking on mid-tier guys to outperform their contracts. It's not a good recipe. I agree with that. And I agree with looking at CJ's rotation that he put on there and saying, all these young guys are going to pan out and it's going to be great. You guys are going to have to listen to the Spotify version of the podcast because I was on one for like 5 minutes reacting to everything, and I think I completely blundered it, and y'all missed it. But nevertheless, I think to rely on that rotation would be an example of the Cardinals cheaping out. And CJ was hyping up guys like Matz and Woodford and Graceffo and McGreevy and Liberatore. And in some ways, it's all prospects and a lot of the guys that people have already looked at and said, yeah, I don't know, thanks, but no thanks with the way those guys have been pitching. Like, I don't think Jake Woodford's part of any 2025 rotation. I really don't. But it's funny. Eric thought the baby woke up. No, it was just me effing up. So I apologize for that one, guys. But I'll keep reading some of these comments. I'm not going to go through the entire thing again. That'll force you to subscribe to Spotify maybe because the Spotify audio is going to be pure the entire way through on some of that. But this has been an adventure. Anthony says if the market goes up, the Cardinals have to adjust. Can't keep settling for mid-tier BS that turns into bad contracts like Steven Matz. Yeah, I mean, it's tough. 1 second here. I wanted to comment on the live chat so people knew I was still here, but it may end up being that they're like, nah, I'm going to bed. Everybody's like, what the hell happened? I think there has to be some degree of going for those mid-tier contracts. Like if you count Nate Eovaldi as a mid-tier contract, 2 years, $17 million per year, then there's maybe a possibility that you're right, that mid-tier contracts can pan out. But if they're going for like the $5 million and the $8 million, there's the market for those guys and the hit rate on those guys is going to be pretty low. But the Cardinals don't seem to identify the Evaldis, do they? Like with Michaelis, they did, but that was from overseas. That was a very specific situation. I don't know who they go out and sign for $17 million this offseason. But I wouldn't say that's mid-tier. I would say like they're at least throwing some money at it. You could look at a lot of the $30 million, $40 million guys that signed this past offseason, and they're all hurt or not performing. And I think John Mozeliak tried to kind of use that as an excuse of why it was okay that they didn't go out and get pitching. I think it's just a matter of you need to get the right pitching, and they haven't done that. They haven't done that to this point, and it's kind of harmed them. Now, again, you could make the case that the Jordan Montgomery trade ends up working out, right? Like Jordan Montgomery looks like he was a good fit for them last year, good fit for them this year so far, 3.69 ERA. I think that's tops in the rotation at this point. And so do you end up viewing that as a good trade, even if, they don't re-sign him? Because Harrison Bader was going to be gone, I think, after this year anyway. He's going to be a free agent as well. And they were able to cobble together a good year and a half from a guy in their rotation with Jordan Montgomery. I think that would be considered a win. Sometimes it's okay to dip into the bargain bin, but you have to be effective when you do it, and you can't do it every time. And I think that's where Cardinals fans are frustrated with the pitching, because it seems like in the last couple of years, it's always been, well, at the deadline, how far into the bargain bin can we go? And, at the end of the day, it's been consistent. It's every July they're looking in those kind of low-hanging fruit trades. And at the end of the day, I just don't know how many years you can consider that to be a sustainable way to handle it. Anthony says, be safe. We know he was never in the market for pitching this offseason. He said it 2 times. Now we try to walk it back. And I'm not saying every mid-tier guy is bad, but you can't do it every time. Yeah, and that's crazy that you commented that, and the comments are on like a 5-minute delay. He says, we got Jay Happ and John Lester at such old ages. And they worked for that year, but you can't, I agree with you, Anthony. It's not sustainable to every year have it be that way and have it just be a scenario where, you just kind of hope and pray that the stopgaps and the bubble gum and the paper clips that you're putting into the rotation can keep helping you out. At one point, I would like to see Mozeliak either this July solve the rotation for the next couple of years with a guy that you stick around by trading for him in July, or do it in the offseason, but not always have it be, well, we're desperate for innings in July. Who do we trade for to just save us for 2 more months? That's kind of been the blueprint. And outside of the Montgomery trade, which, again, I say is a good one because they at least were looking 1 year ahead with that. But can they pull a rabbit out of the hat and identify the next guy that they can get that done with, and then maybe extend that guy before it gets to, his free agency is so close, he's just going to test it. That's the trick there. 2-year deal, super safe, especially at the price point. Yeah, Eovaldi, who's the next Eovaldi? That's what they got to identify. And yeah, it's been that way the past 3 years, and we'll see. We'll see if they're able to change the narrative on that. That's the part of the model that I think has to change. But you guys are all poo-pooing on CJ's rotation. I do think if the Cardinals are going to get the rotation they want, just spending for it every single time is also not a winning recipe because pitchers do get hurt, and oftentimes even the good ones can get hurt, and it ends up being money not well spent. So if McGreevy or Graceffo or Liberatore, get one of those guys to pan out, develop somebody. I know it's a crazy thought, but that would be something that helps the Cardinals in the long run too. So we'll see if they're ever able to do it again, but who knows? CJ is still, man, he's fighting the good fight. Says it did work out with a depleted rotation. Lester and Happ saved their season. And they did, as did Wade LeBlanc before his injury. So that's kind of crazy. Jack loves that Libby is getting innings. I know he's going to figure it out. Yeah, I think you got to give him another 3-4 weeks, and then if it's not working out, you might have to make a trade for another one of those stopgap guys. But Libby could have a bad year this year and could still end up pitching well again in the future. But it's kind of like sink or swim time, I think, for Matthew Liberatore in many ways. We'll see. This is not a Rockies hat. It's a great question. I won't tell you what kind of hat it is, though. It's a secret. That's the deal with the backwards hats all the time. You just got to guess. But I will say it's not a Rockies hat. You got your one guess, Corn, and you missed it. But that's fun. I like people wondering that. Does it have like a baseball hat logo on it to make you think it's baseball? I don't know what I'm actually showing here. Timothy says the best thing about the last couple games has been the ability to get shut down innings and the ability to score after getting scored on. That's what it's been lacking for this Cardinals team, isn't it? The notion of can all of these elements of the team work together on the same night? Offense, defense, special teams, not special teams, starting pitching, bullpen pitching, base running, which they had a nice double steal today that we talked about. That's really what it boils down to. Desk is saying hello. Desk, I think you're brand new. Like you, Desk. Thank you for being here. Yeah, I think that's a great point that Timothy brought on. They finally got into a spot where they're contributing and working in conjunction with one another. Hey, tonight you don't have the best, the best bullpen with a couple of guys that came in. Didn't matter. We gave you lots of runs, and the rotation got 7 innings. So you're all kind of working in cohesion, I think is a great way to put it. They do need to sweep Washington, Corn. You're right about that. Does Dylan become a lefty pitching starter only? That's from Chad. Yeah, I mean, if DeYoung's going to keep playing a lot, it honestly might depend more about Gorman, because Gorman is a guy that's not going to play against lefties, and so easier to get guys like DeYoung, which he's been playing anyway, but guys like Carlson in there as well. And if Tommy Edman is hitting, you're going to play him every day too. So, yeah, I kind of could see it, Chad. I think Dylan could be a platoon bat, even though prior to today he had better power numbers against righties, actually. That's obviously flipped now after a 2-home run game, but still. Kevin said the fact that they kept adding on as the game went on is such a good time for where this team could be heading. Could not agree more with that. That's a great point. And I think Blue Jays Rock 6 is asking about Gorman or a Walker jersey first. Walker is probably the play, but I mean, Gorman, don't count out Gorman completely just yet. I don't think he's just going to completely fade into the ether, but he's got to find that swing back and get back on a hot streak for sure. Anthony would love to see them actually target Aaron Nola and Blake Snell this offseason. Would be top 3 with Miles. Yeah, it would, but I mean, you got to hope those guys stay healthy, because if they don't, that's how you end up like the 2012 to 15 Phillies, when all their old guys kind of got old at once, and then you spend some more money on some guys who are going to be old as well, and some pitchers, and if they get hurt, Bill DeWitt's money is not going to stretch as thin as you'd hope that it would. But yeah, you got to identify. Eduardo Rodriguez has been good. Stroman should be good again. Is he going to be available too? I guess maybe he only signed a short-term deal. Shout out to the random Kwon Young Kim, July 21, when he was randomly the best pitcher in MLB. That's from the grave of Einstein. I remember those times. Those were good times. I think I was covering one of those games he pitched at Wrigley, if I'm not mistaken. They got to develop as well, but I'm not going with a 3 or 4 younger guys in the rotation for next year. Anthony, you're right about that. CJ's original comment, though, was about the 2025 rotation, in fairness. But I agree. You can't just go with unprovens in the rotation. But by 2025, maybe the Cardinals are lucky enough that a lot of those unprovens end up being, well, better and more proven. Sandy Alcantara's been terrible lately. Now we're talking about the Alcantara situation. He was a mid-level prospect, according to Aaron, which is true. The Cardinals looked, I think they had Flaherty above him. I think they had Dakota Hudson above him. And ultimately, you know, the Hudson one, I think, is a whiff. But I just don't think they viewed Sandy as that frontline guy. And they also said, well, he's got value, and it takes value to get value, and we need an outfielder, and they settled on Ozuna, which obviously was regrettable. But Aaron says, acting like we all knew that he was going to win the Cy Young is foolish. At the time, the move was not crazy. And I agree, at the time, the move was not crazy. But it sucks that Sandy won the Cy Young last year, and Zach Gallen very well may win it this year. So, yeah. Eric says, Ryan, you can't sit here and say you were against trading Gallen when no one knew who he was. Legit prospect when traded, and he wasn't a legit prospect when traded. Yeah, it's true. It was a miss, but it was just one of those that it's inexplicable. Julio Urias is a free agent as well, but they'll never target him. Doesn't give up Cardinal vibes. I mean, he's kind of been injured a lot recently, too. There's zero reason to go after Ozuna. That's not really true. He had a lot of home runs, but I kind of knew it at the time, man. I was like, if you go for it, go get Yelich. And then I said, when they got Ozuna, I was like, that's great. They didn't give up any of their top prospects. Now go make one more move, one more big signing. And they never did that second thing to get him over the hump, and then everything kind of fizzled from there. All right, we're kind of getting into the hodgepodge. It's past 1 a.m. I am going to wrap this thing up here. If you guys wanted to really hear me laughing my ass off about CJ's rotation and the reaction y'all had to it, scroll into the YouTube live stream when you rewatch it. Actually, you can't because you won't hear it. You gotta subscribe on Spotify and just scroll to it because where there's like a 5-minute gap on YouTube, there won't be a gap on Spotify because I had the audio rolling the whole time. I don't know what happened. I forgot to click back onto the main screen, and so YouTube missed a lot of that, I think. But it was worth checking out. Subscribe to the YouTube channel before you get out of here. Appreciate you guys as always. Thank you to those who participated in the Super Chat tonight. That was a lot of fun as well. We'll be back here pretty soon with another live stream, but the podcast on B-Shape Daily will roll regardless. So Spotify and Apple Podcasts, make sure you're following B-Shape Daily over there, and the podcasts are posted to YouTube as well. So thank you guys so much for joining. Appreciate you guys sticking through a little bit of the technical difficulties that I had tonight. We'll talk to you next time on B-Shape Daily Live. Peace.